Greetings, and welcome to Echoes of the Forgotten Earth, a place where curiosity takes off its shoes and science wraps itself in a cozy comforter. Tonight, we're going to slip into a question that's as strangely magnetic as it is quietly exhilarating. This is the kind of idea that slides quietly into your mind when the lights are dim, when the world seems almost too closely woven to be mere accident. The question is this: is it possible that Earth, not just its soil or sky or interlaced life forms, but the planet in its entirety represents something alive? Not alive in the fashion of a sleeping bear or a towering oak or a bustling reef, but rather alive in the sense of something vast, deliberate, and profoundly quiet. Something alive not with lungs or words, but with a knowing that somehow exists beneath. Before we lose ourselves entirely to the wonder, let's pause for a moment. Wherever you're sitting, you're right now on, or very close to, the surface of a world. This isn't simply a hunk of rock orbiting a star. It's drenched and gusty, surging with movement. It erupts and then heals, chills and then thaws, decomposes and then blooms anew. It manufactures weather, and it does more than simply offer a home to life. It creates the conditions life needs. It has been generating these conditions across the expanse of billions of years, never seeming to search for an instruction manual. Here we find ourselves, just small pieces of this whole, each wondering whether the sum might be something greater than its ingredients. Are we dwelling upon a being that, in its own impossible way, thinks, feels, or even dreams? That thought isn't simply a modern-day invention. It's ancient. Long before satellites orbited overhead or seismographs sketched the planet's pulse, people imagined Earth as a who, not a what. In the old stories, mountains were the planet's bones, rivers her lifeblood, and forests her flowing hair. Earth wasn't just a background for life, it was an entity, a force with its own character. Sometimes it nurtured, and sometimes it retaliated, but never did it merely sit by passively. You might argue that this is only metaphor human beings projecting their own qualities onto the natural world. That's a fair point. Yet, what if those metaphors weren't merely poetic devices? What if, in their attempts to put a face to Earth, humans were actually sensing something genuine? Something for which they lacked the language or the science? Pause there. It's easy to let fantasy take the lead when questions grow this grand. No, Earth does not have eyes to peer through clouds or lips to whistle with the winds or morning chores on a cosmic to-do list. The deeper question is subtler. Might Earth function as a whole, not just in a mechanical but also in a meaningful way? And if so, could that count as a type of consciousness? Definitions can wait. Let's just leave the mind's door open for now. Now look around wherever you are. The chair under you, the walls beside you, the glowing screen. Every bit of it ultimately comes from the Earth, whether it's wood, metal, electrons, or simply the air filling your lungs right now. Everything around you has passed, one way or another, through the planet's hands. That's easy to overlook, especially when we live layered within apartments, surrounded by synthetic materials and digital networks, charging and plugging in. Yet beneath everything we build, we're still enveloped in the living skin of a system ancient, dynamic, and delicately intricate. And this system is anything but idle. Far below, tectonic plates edge across molten seas of rock. Oceans don't just ebb and flow with the tides, they pulse over eons, shifting temperatures and chemistry. The air breathes carbon, storms forth, and settles into clouds. Precipitation swells rivers, which refill underground basins, and, across the globe, rainforests take in their fill. These aren't mere accidents. They're part of enormous, united, self-correcting cycles that, astonishingly, need no driver at least, so it looks on the surface. In the 1970s, scientist James Lovelock suggested something startling enough to earn both skepticism and admiration. He proposed that Earth operates like a single, self-regulating entity. He named this idea the Gaia hypothesis, referencing the ancient Greek personification of Earth. He didn't mean to claim the planet is literally a goddess, but rather that its major systems, climate, chemistry, rocks, and biology, don't just run side by side, they interact as if by design. If the planet gets too warm, cooling mechanisms activate. If atmospheric carbon soars, oceans take up the load. Oxygen dips, plants and microbes adjust. It's as if Earth senses imbalance and quietly, persistently, brings itself back. At the time, this notion was controversial. Still is, to some degree. Plenty of scientists accepted tangible planetary feedback loops. These were easy to measure. But to call Earth alive was edging too close to mysticism for comfort, and to do so forced thinkers to face a larger, more unsettling question. If Earth is something alive, what are we to it? Offspring, cells, thoughts, or mere germs in the lungs? Science struggles with questions like that, but they'll never entirely fade because the more closely we study the planet, the clearer it becomes. Everything is entangled. The clearer it becomes. Everything is entangled. Coral reefs influence weather patterns. Volcanoes enrich soils with minerals. The migrations of animals carry seeds which shape forests, which shape rainfall, which shapes rivers, and on, spiraling outward. It isn't only that everything links to everything else. The links themselves seem to have memory, direction, and, at times, something that looks very much like purpose. Think of your own body. Take one liver cell. On its own, it's alive. It processes nutrients, responds to stimuli, performs its tasks, but it doesn't think. It's not conscious, not as an individual. You, however, are. Your consciousness arises from the combined activity of billions of such cells, communicating constantly, cooperating to maintain the whole. None of them alone knows you, but all of them together are you. So what if humans, whales, fungi, trees, winds, ocean temperatures, what if all of these are to Earth what individual cells are to you? Each one significant on its own, but truly meaningful only within something much larger. You don't need to settle this now. Let the thought rest somewhere in the back of your mind. When we talk about consciousness, we usually grab for a narrow human-shaped definition. We picture something that speaks, reasons, and describes itself with the words, I am, and I think. Yet even among animals, consciousness doesn't come in just one style. An octopus explores puzzles with flexible arms. A raven commits faces to memory for years. Elephants seem to respond to loss with grief. Below that, quieter, stranger forms of awareness appear. Plants leaning toward light and shrinking from touch. Fungi changing their growth patterns with shifting conditions. Bacteria forming communities that act together. Awareness isn't an on-off switch. It's a gradient, a continuum. If awareness can occur without language, without eyes, without a nervous system like ours, why should we insist that a planet, something slow, immense, and ancient, could not have its own kind of awareness? That doesn't mean Earth writes novels or frets about schedules, but perhaps it feels imbalance in some primal way. Perhaps it registers when something goes wrong. Perhaps it compensates not out of desire, but out of necessity. Living on Earth is strange because of how strongly the planet responds to what we do. We dig and watch the ground sag. We send gases into the air and storms intensify. We cut forests and droughts take hold. Some outcomes are unsurprising products of chemistry and physics. Others feel eerily like reaction, not revenge, not anger. Just adjustment to system reshaping itself in the presence of something suddenly too loud. Which leads to a lingering question. When something reacts, does that imply any sort of awareness? Even a minimal one? Think about a thermostat. It doesn't know it's keeping a room comfortable. It just reacts to temperature and flips heat on or off to restore equilibrium. Earth does this too at vastly larger scales. It influences heat, shifts water, releases or absorbs gases, changes the reflectivity of its surface. System upon system, stacked and intertwined. Are these merely automatic processes? Or does something about them approach what we might call choice? We may never have a clear answer. Perhaps we're not meant to. Consciousness on the scale of a planet might not resemble what we think of as awareness. It might look like ongoing stability. Perhaps clouds are its wandering thoughts. Perhaps its feelings show up as feedback loops, nothing romantic or anthropomorphic, just layer upon layer of patterns, enduring, adjusting, alive in a form we're poorly equipped to notice. Remember, we didn't always know where our own thinking lived. Early philosophers placed the mind in the heart or the stomach. It took centuries of observation, dissection, and experiment to link thought to the brain. And even now, we don't fully understand how brain matter generates experience. If recognizing consciousness in something the size of a small organ is difficult, imagine trying to recognize it in something the size of a world. It might not just be hard, it could be fundamentally different. Still, hints surround us. Coordination, balance, the uncanny timing of environmental responses. And again, that faint sense that we are not alone. Not just because of animals and microbes and storms, but because at times the entire system behaves as though it knows when it's being observed. We'll move deeper into that idea later. For now, notice what it feels like simply to hold this possibility. Not to argue for it or against it, but to rest in the thought that the ground below you may not be mere ground, that it might belong to something that registers, something that perceives in its own way, something that, on scales too wide and slow to grasp, could be listening. Here we are again, drifting a little further into the question we began with. Now that we've opened the door to the idea that Earth might be more than background scenery, we need to take a few careful steps backward, back through time, not logic. Because long before anyone had language for feedback loops or planetary regulation, people were already listening to the Earth. They did it not with sensors or software, but with tales, ceremonies, and a quiet conviction that the ground beneath them held a kind of life. This wasn't a marginal view. In most ancient cultures, the idea that Earth possessed a spirit or was itself a spirit was hardly questioned. It was fundamental. Earth provided food, shelter, rhythm, storms. It shepherded birth and received the dead. It moved slowly, but not aimlessly. To those whose survival depended on reading its patterns, those movements began to feel like personality. Think of how often the land appears in early spiritual traditions as more than just soil. For many indigenous peoples, Earth is a mother, not as poetic shorthand, but as a literal relation. The Hopi of the American Southwest regard Earth as a living origin of all beings, deserving care and gratitude. In Maori tradition, Papatuanuku is the Earth Mother stretched beneath Ranginui, the Sky Father. Their children, in some versions, pry them apart to bring in light. In Andean worldviews, Pachamama embodies the Earth, generous and formidable, a being with whom one can fall into or out of harmony. These aren't simply decorative labels for rock and dirt. They function as roles and relationships. They imply obligations, not only about how to use land, but how to treat it. Even in language, the word for earth often pulls double duty, referring both to the soil beneath your shoes and the entire planetary body. It's not just dirt, it's something older, more mysterious, and often subtly aware. Across continents and centuries, a shared theme emerges. People didn't view themselves as separate from Earth. They experienced themselves as strands in its fabric, bound in a mutual relationship. From a modern vantage point, you could call that mythology, pointing out that these stories don't rest on controlled experiments. Yet that doesn't mean they weren't built from observation. Early peoples were extraordinarily attentive. They tracked animal migrations, plant cycles, early warnings of storms. They read the horizon like a pulse and the stars as a calendar. When they spoke of a living Earth, it wasn't necessarily from ignorance but from paying close attention. And attention, more often than not, is where science begins. Long before microscopes, many noticed that illness spreads from person to person. They didn't know about microbes, but they saw the patterns and told stories to explain them. Much later, science arrived with new terminology. What were once spirits became germs. what were once gods became systems. So when we hear about ancient traditions treating mountains as holy, singing to rivers or thanking soil after harvest, it's worth asking, what were they seeing that we now overlook? What changes, what cadences became so reliable they started to feel intentional? In Australia, Aboriginal songlines map the land with roots that are both physical and spiritual. These songs aren't just directions, they encode, verse by verse, where water can be found, when specific plants flower, how landscapes behave. To travel by song is to walk within a living archive. To sing it is to help keep it alive. In Japan, the concept of kami includes spirits residing in features like stones, streams, and trees. These aren't separate from nature. They are nature, seen through a different lens. They're treated with reverence because they are believed to respond not symbolically, but actually. Again and again, in different corners of the world, across eras, we find the same pattern. Earth is engaged with, not just extracted from. It is consulted, respected, interacted with. Modern science may not endorse the literal idea of spirits and rivers, but it is slowly catching up to the complexity that gave rise to those beliefs. Today we know forests are not just clusters of trees. Hidden beneath them, fungal webs carry nutrients, warnings, and chemical messages. A tree under insect attack can signal its neighbors to bolster their defenses. Older trees can nourish younger, shaded ones through their roots. Researchers sometimes call this the wood wide web. Long before anyone named it that, someone watching the forest might simply have said, "The forest is thinking." And in a sense, it was. Weather too becomes different when you live near it. You notice the winds change before a storm, the hush of birds before oppressive heat, the earthy scent that precedes rain. Over many seasons, those sensory patterns stop feeling random and turn into signs. And when signs appear, it's natural to suspect someone or something is speaking. This isn't superstition. It's narrative born from careful observation, before science has permanently connected all the dots. And sometimes, those stories align with truths that empirical research later confirms. Ancient agricultural methods offer similar clues. Traditional farmers in many cultures preserved soil fertility not by importing chemicals, but through rotation, rest, and close reading of the land. They treated soil not as a blank substrate, but as something animated with its own needs and boundaries. Often, these old approaches sustain productivity better than intensive industrial techniques, not because they're outdated, but because they're better attuned to the system. Even rituals that look purely symbolic can shelter practical wisdom. Burning certain herbs to cleanse a space can, in some cases, lower airborne bacteria. Offerings to river deities might once have doubled as rudimentary water checks when the taste, color, or smell changed. It was read not just as contamination, but as a shift in the river's spirit. Earth behaved like a being, so it was treated as one. If that seems unscientific, it's worth asking how narrowly we're defining being. At the scale we're used to, life moves, breathes, eats. But stretch the timescale, and mountains creep, rivers carve, continents collide. Earth breathes too, in its own vast rhythms, carbon moving through air and sea, ecosystems rising and falling. The trouble is that most of this is so slow, we only notice when we look back. The notion of a living Earth isn't mere nostalgia. It may have been a practical framework that helped early societies survive. When you believe the land is sentient, you hesitate before taking. You don't carelessly poison a river that can hear. You don't strip a forest that's watching. You live with caution, gratitude, and yes, sometimes fear, but always in relationship. Now, as we face planetary changes of our own making, modern science begins, somewhat reluctantly, to echo those older intuitions. We talk of Earth system science and planetary boundaries to describe how climate, water, soil, and biodiversity interweave. We use terms like resilience, balance, and thresholds. The more we study, the less these systems look linear and predictable, and the more they behave like something intent on maintaining equilibrium. In recent years, scientists using network theory have found keystone species, critical nodes in ecological webs. Remove them, and entire networks weaken. This isn't a chain, it's a web, sensitive to the slightest touch. A small change in some insect population can ripple into crop yields, water availability, even climate. And those ripples rarely stop at one direction. They circle back. The planet, in other words, doesn't just host life. It joins in. We don't simply live on Earth. We live through it. And in some broad, slow, distributed way, perhaps the planet lives through us as well. From here, we can begin to ask how modern science, with its data and models, intersects with the ancient sense that Earth is, in some fashion, alive. Intersects with the ancient sense that Earth is, in some fashion, alive. Now that we've walked through older worldviews that framed Earth as a presence rather than a backdrop, we arrive at a turning point. For centuries, the dominant scientific outlook moved in the opposite direction. What was once apparent, a spirit or a great being, became an object, a mechanism, a sum of measurable components. But not everyone was content with a purely mechanical picture. In the late 20th century, an idea surfaced that quietly echoed those deep-rooted intuitions, only this time it spoke in equations, models, and systems diagrams. It became known as the Gaia hypothesis. The name itself raised suspicion. Gaia came from Greek mythology, the personified earth. It sounded like something out of poetry, not a laboratory, yet the questions behind it were thoroughly scientific. How does this planet manage to stay suitable for life over such enormous spans of time? Why has Earth remained relatively stable, habitable for billions of years when its neighbors have not? Look at Mars and Venus. Venus is a furnace, wrapped in a dense atmosphere of heat-trapping gases. Mars is cold and barren, its thin atmosphere largely stripped away. Between them, Earth looks oddly poised, not static, not unchanging, but steady enough to sustain oceans, weather, and biology for eons. That stability is puzzling. The sun's energy output has changed. Asteroids have collided, supervolcanoes have erupted, continents have drifted. Yet, through all this, Earth has held within a narrow band of conditions friendly to life. James Lovelock, an atmospheric chemist, began to wonder whether life itself might be part of the explanation. Instead of imagining life as a passive passenger adapting to external conditions, he asked whether life might be helping maintain those conditions. Later, microbiologist Lynn Margulis joined him, bringing her expertise on microbes and symbiosis into the picture. The basic idea was bold. The sum of all living things on Earth interacts with the air, water, and rock in ways that regulate temperature, gas composition, salinity, and more. Life, in this view, doesn't just adjust to its environment, it co-creates the environment it needs. At the time, the standard view in biology was that organisms evolve to fit their surroundings. The surroundings don't bend to fit organisms. Lovelock and Margulis proposed a loop. Life alters the environment shapes life, and together they form a system with self-regulating properties. To make this concept less abstract, Lovelock offered a thought experiment called Daisy World. Imagine a simple planet populated only by black and white daisies. Dark daisies absorb more heat, light ones reflect it. As the star's warmth increases, white daisies flourish because they keep their local area cooler. As temperatures drop, black daisies do better, soaking up warmth. Without a central control, the combined growth of the daisies keeps planetary temperatures within a range suitable for both. It's a feedback loop. No daisy intends to balance the climate, but collectively, they do. In reality, Earth is far more complicated, but Lovelock pointed to actual feedbacks that mirror this pattern. Some marine algae release compounds that help seed cloud formation. Those clouds reflect sunlight, cooling the surface. Rainforests pump moisture into the air, creating rainfall patterns that support the forests themselves. Growing trees lock away carbon, changing atmospheric chemistry. Over long periods, the weathering of rock pulls carbon dioxide out of the sky and into stone, a process guided in part by microbial life. These interactions form loops, not isolated cause and effect chains. That's the heart of Gaia, the idea that the biosphere and the physical environment function as a unified system with a tendency toward balance. At first, many scientists bristled. The early formulations of Gaia sounded vague, and the name carried spiritual overtones that made the research community wary. But as more data accumulated and Earth system science matured, some of Gaia's core insights were reframed and gradually accepted. Instead of saying Earth behaves like a living organism, researchers began to speak of coupled systems, feedback dynamics, resilience, and nonlinear interactions. The language shifted, but the underlying question persisted. Are the planet's life and its environment just a pile of parts? Or do they together form something more, something that maintains itself? Today, no serious scientist denies that life influences climate, and that climate in turn influences life. These connections are central to Earth system models. The debate now centers on how far that influence goes and what it implies. Is planetary regulation just a happy side effect of evolution, or does it reflect something deeper, something closer to planetary scale behavior? One argument against a strong version of Gaia goes like this. Species that stabilize their surroundings survive longer. Over time, their actions accumulate, making the planet seem self-regulated without any need to invoke intention or awareness. It's simply natural selection playing out on a large stage. Others aren't fully satisfied with that answer because some of the feedbacks we see are strikingly global. They link organisms that will never encounter each other directly, spanning oceans and continents. The patterns look less like isolated adaptations and more like emergent coordination. This is where the idea of emergence becomes crucial. Emergence is what happens when simple, local interactions give rise to complex, system-level behavior. One ant isn't brilliant. An ant colony can solve complicated problems. A single neuron doesn't think, a brain does. Maybe no single organism is trying to keep Earth habitable, but the sum of their interactions produces that effect. In that sense, the planet's regulation could itself be a form of awareness, not of thoughts and words, but of continuity. A system that knows, in its actions if not in its self-description, how to keep going. Consider your own body again. You have countless automatically running processes, immune responses, temperature control, nutrient flow. Cells and organs don't need to understand the whole picture. They do their part, and the emergent result is health, balance, plus a sense of when something is wrong. What would such a process look like at planetary scale? Perhaps forests that reseed themselves after disturbance, coral reefs that adjust their growth where currents change, ocean currents that shift routes when salinity and heat vary. Earth may have no brain, but perhaps it doesn't require one. The network taken together may be enough. This challenges our usual picture of consciousness. We tend to imagine a command center, a controlling self. Yet in nature, many intelligences are decentralized. Slime molds can navigate mazes without neurons. Flocks of birds pivot in unison with no leader. Even human minds are less a single voice and more a negotiation among different subsystems. If awareness can be spread out, why stop at a forest, or a reef, or an ecosystem? Why not at the scale of an entire planet? That doesn't mean Earth has intentions like ours, but maybe it has tendencies. Maybe it leans toward conditions that support life, because life is part of the machinery that keeps it stable. Maybe what we call the balance of nature is closer to an instinct than an accident. Seen that way, Gaia stops being just a beautiful metaphor and becomes a quiet reframing. Not a return to old myths, but a return to relationship. Earth is not simply a location where life occurs. It's how life happens. Organisms don't just adapt inside boundaries, they participate in drawing those boundaries. Still, no regulation system is infinite. Push it past its limits, and it doesn't fight back in fury, it transforms. Feedback loops can flip direction. Thresholds can be crossed. When that happens in living bodies, we call it illness or collapse. When it happens on a planet, we call it climate shifts, mass extinctions, new regimes. From this angle, Gaia becomes more than an intriguing concept. It becomes a warning. If the planet is a self-adjusting system and life is woven into the mechanisms of its stability, then destabilizing that life by altering climate too quickly, reducing biodiversity, degrading soils and waters, means stressing the system itself. Climate change isn't only about extra heat, higher seas, or altered rainfall. It's about the planet's regulatory machinery straining under rapid change. Warm oceans soak up less carbon. Melting ice reflects less sunlight and reveals darker surfaces that absorb more heat. Dying forests stop storing carbon and start releasing it. The loops still exist, but they amplify disruption instead of damping it. We've effectively hit the fast-forward button on processes that used to evolve slowly. The planet is adjusting, not to preserve its past state, but to find a new balance point. Whether that new balance is compatible with human societies as we know them is an open question. If we still use the name Gaia, we should be clear. Gaia is not sentimental. It doesn't prefer humans or reward intelligence. What persists are those elements that integrate with the system without undermining it. In that light, our species starts to look less like a chosen mind and more like a test of whether conscious beings can live in balance with the system that produced them. An organism's immune system isn't vengeful, it's protective. Gaia may have something analogous, not white blood cells, but systemic responses to stress, heat waves, floods, fires, storms. These aren't moral judgments, they're consequences. All of this leads to a shift in how we see ourselves, not as owners of a planet, not even as its caretakers standing above it, but as parts within a larger body capable of disrupting it, capable of healing it, never truly outside it. Whether or not we choose the language of Gaia, the insight is the same. Earth is responsive. It adjusts. It learns, in a non-human sense, from what happens within it. And if we recognize that, we might start behaving less like outsiders making demands, and more like participants in an ongoing, fragile conversation. From here, we can zoom in on other mysterious planetary rhythm cycles so deep and subtle that some have wondered whether they amount to something like a pulse. Whether they amount to something like a pulse. The notion of a pulse carries a lot of weight. We link it instinctively with life. Anything living tends to have some recurring heartbeat, breath, hunger, sleep, tides of energy, and rest. Pulses signal regulation, coordination, an inner rhythm that keeps a system in order. So if Earth has rhythms, real, measurable ones, what exactly are they doing? What is being kept in sync? Begin with what's most obvious. Rotation. The planet turns once about every 24 hours, a steady spin that's been going on for billions of years, with only tiny variations. But it's not merely spinning, it's producing a cycle that saturates every living system here. Light and dark, warmth and coolness. For organisms, this isn't background, it's structure. All forms of life we know, humans, birds, insects, microbes, fungi, have internal clocks tuned to this rotation. These circadian rhythms influence sleep, feeding, hormone cycles, and cellular repair. Even bacteria exhibit day-night cycles. Life doesn't just tolerate Earth's turning, it aligns with it. Then there's the yearly orbit. One path around the sun every 365 and a quarter days. That long, steady rhythm underlies seasons. It shapes migrations, breeding cycles, flowering and leaf fall. Trees bud and shed according to it. Animals time their journeys around it. Weather systems follow it. Earth's changing position in space becomes a global signal. Life responds in organized waves. The oceans carry additional beats. Tides rise and fall multiple times a day under the combined pull of the moon and sun, but they also follow subtler, longer cycles, fortnightly changes between spring and neap tides, monthly lunar phases, and an 18.6-year cycle tied to the moon's orbital tilt. Coastal ecosystems time reproduction, feeding, and movement to these schedules. Fish spawn in concert with particular tides. Crabs march with the moon. Beneath the surface, vast currents transport heat around the globe like circulating blood. Large-scale flows such as the Atlantic overturning circulation move warm water north and cooler water south, reshaping weather across continents. These patterns speed up, slow down, and shift, a kind of deep, planetary tempo. In the Pacific, the El Niño Southern Oscillation warms and cools ocean surfaces every few years, altering rainfall, storm tracks, and drought patterns worldwide. It's not a perfect metronome, but not sheer chaos either, more like an irregular heartbeat with a recognizable pattern. The atmosphere carries its own oscillations, pressure systems strengthening and weakening on repeat cycles, tropical rainfall marching eastward in the Madden-Julian oscillation, stratospheric winds reversing direction every couple of years in the quasi-biennial oscillation. Polar vortices expand in winter and shrink in summer. These are rhythms, layered on top of each other, affecting everything from storm tracks to jet streams. Individually, each cycle might seem like simple physics. Taken together, they outline something more like a pulse. Many beats, overlapping and interwoven, orchestrating a living world. Some object to calling these rhythms a pulse, arguing that we're just projecting biological ideas onto mechanical processes. Tides are gravity plus water. Seasons follow orbital geometry. No heartbeat required. Yet those explanations don't make the rhythms less remarkable. They make them richer. Earth doesn't just move. It integrates external forces, reshaping them into predictable cycles that life can rely on. That reliability is what allows ecosystems to develop complex patterns in the first place. Then there are subtler phenomena, like the Schumann resonances, standing electromagnetic waves resonating in the cavity between Earth's surface and the ionosphere, powered primarily by lightning. The fundamental frequency hovers around 7.83 Hz, with higher harmonics layered above it. Some have nicknamed this Earth's heartbeat. That's not a formal scientific term, but the metaphor persists because these signals are global, persistent, and quietly present in the background all the time. Research has explored potential links between these frequencies and human brainwaves. Findings are tentative and mechanisms unclear, but the question alone is striking. Are we in some faint way in tune with the planet's electromagnetic hum? Even the so-called solid Earth has its rhythms. Tectonic plates creep and grind, stress builds along faults, then releases in earthquakes and aftershocks. Volcanic systems inflate and deflate, with eruptions that come not in random bursts, but in sequences and episodes, sometimes spanning centuries. Massive volcanoes like Etna or Kilauea pulse over long timescales, inhaling magma and exhaling ash and gas. There are also Earth tides minute deformations of the crust caused by the gravitational tug of moon and sun. The ground itself rises and falls by centimeters, subtly altering groundwater levels, magma pressures, and even the timing of tiny quakes. It's as if the planet's solid shell flexes in time with celestial forces. Another planetary rhythm is written in carbon. Each year, vegetation in the northern hemisphere green-ups in spring, drawing carbon dioxide from the air, and browns in autumn, releasing it back. Satellites can see this annual inhalation and exhalation, a planetary breathing pattern superimposed on the long-term rise of greenhouse gases. Some scientists describe Earth's biosphere as having something akin to metabolism. The planet absorbs energy from the sun, channels it through photosynthesis, stores it in biomass, then dissipates it as heat. It cycles nutrients, distributes materials, and maintains internal conditions within ranges that support life adjusting when inputs change, slowing down in winter, surging in spring. None of this automatically proves that Earth is conscious. Cycles are not thoughts. Pulses aren't necessarily feelings. But they hint at a truth that's easy to miss. This world is far from static. It's responsive, layered, and constantly adjusting. When systems are this responsive, when they sense inputs, transform them, and return to stable-ish states, it's natural to at least ask whether we're seeing the outer edge of something mind-like. Your own body doesn't consciously manage all its homeostatic loops. You don't will your heart to beat faster when you run, or your capillaries to constrict when you're cold. These changes occur automatically yet meaningfully. They keep you alive. Maybe Earth's rhythms are similar action without deliberation, significance without narrative. A constant effort, spread over time and space, to persist. Of course, we must be careful. The planet is not a person. It doesn't have desires or make choices the way you do. But that doesn't relegate it to being a mute, inert stage set either. These deep, overlapping cycles suggest something more than random fluctuation. They signal persistence, organization, and an ongoing tendency towards some kind of dynamic equilibrium. We can see how fragile that equilibrium is becoming. Climate change is altering Earth's rhythms. Carbon levels rise, temperatures climb, weather patterns warp. Forests that once soaked up carbon now burn more often and, in some regions, emit more than they absorb. Permafrost, once locked solid, thaws and releases trapped greenhouse gases. Warmer oceans store heat differently and absorb less carbon, upsetting their own patterns. Ice disappears, removing one of the planet's most reflective surfaces. The cycles have not disappeared, but their timing and intensity are changing. The pulse is still there. It's just growing irregular. This is not the story of a planet dying. Earth will continue, with or without humans. It's the story of a pulse being forced into a new rhythm, one that might not be compatible with the life ways we've built. Which raises another question. If we live inside this planetary pulse, what happens when we stop aligning our behavior with it? And what might it look like to sync up again? Not by going backward, but by learning from how these cycles work. To answer that, we need to look more closely at the engines driving Earth's breath and heartbeat, the forests and oceans that behave less like scenery and more like organs. The forests and oceans that behave less like scenery and more like organs. When people call forests the lungs of the planet, they're usually talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide. Plants take in CO2, release O2, and store carbon in their trunks, roots, and soil. That's true, but it's only the doorway into a much larger, more intricate role. Forests don't simply exhale oxygen. They shape climate, steer rainfall, regulate temperature, and influence atmospheric chemistry on scales that stretch far beyond their borders. They're not just habitats for life. They're powerful agents in how the Earth system functions. Consider the Amazon. It's often described as a carbon sink, absorbing and holding immense amounts of carbon and thereby moderating global warming. But that's only part of its story. The Amazon also creates much of its own rain. Trees there pull water from the ground and release it into the air as vapor, a process called transpiration. That vapor condenses into clouds, those clouds drop rain, and the rain, in turn, sustains the forest. This is more than a simple cycle. It's a feedback loop forest, making rain, rain feeding forest, each reinforcing the other. Moisture from this system doesn't just fall back where it started. Air currents carry it across South America and beyond, affecting rainfall patterns far downstream, even on other continents. When forests shrink, that loop weakens. Less moisture goes into the air, less rain returns, and regions downwind can grow drier. Other forests play similar roles. Boreal forests at high latitudes store staggering amounts of carbon in soils and roots, and their dark or snow-covered surfaces help regulate how much sunlight is reflected or absorbed. In the tropics, dense canopies dampen temperature swings, stabilize humidity, and keep nutrients in play through tight recycling between plants and soil. Forests also communicate. Underground, their roots are fused into networks with fungi known as mycorrhizae. Through this fungal web, trees and other plants exchange water, nutrients, and signals. A tree under insect attack can send chemical warnings through the network, prompting others to raise their defenses. Larger, older trees can share resources with shaded seedlings, giving them a better chance at survival. These exchanges aren't random. They vary with context and need, implying a form of coordination. If forests can be thought of as parts of the planet's respiratory system, oceans resemble its circulatory system. Covering most of Earth's surface, they absorb, store, and move heat, carbon, and oxygen around the globe. They hold far more carbon than the atmosphere and land combined. They transport warmth from the equator toward the poles and return cold water through deep currents, smoothing out climate extremes. One crucial process is the biological pump. Tiny photosynthetic organisms in the sunlit surface waters, phytoplankton convert carbon dioxide into organic matter. Some of that matter sinks when they die or are eaten, transporting carbon into deeper waters and eventually into sediments. There, it can remain sequestered for centuries or longer. Without this pump, levels of CO2 in the air would be dramatically higher and the climate very different. Phytoplankton are microscopic, yet they carry out roughly half of the planet's photosynthesis. They nourish entire food webs, from small fish to the largest whales. Many also release compounds that help form cloud condensation, nuclei, tiny particles on which water droplets coalesce. Those clouds then affect how much sunlight reaches the surface, completing another feedback loop between life and climate. Ocean circulation. Thermohaline circulation, driven by differences in temperature and salinity, functions like a planetary conveyor belt. It connects surface waters with the deep ocean, redistributing heat and dissolved gases. Regions like Western Europe are much milder than their latitude alone would suggest, largely thanks to these currents. But such flows are sensitive. Changes in ice melt, salinity, and temperature can weaken them, triggering shifts in regional climates and weather patterns. The oceans also send material back into the atmosphere. Sea spray carries salts and organic particles upward. Marine organisms produce aerosols that seed clouds. These exchanges alter how reflective the planet is, where and when rain falls, and how heat is stored or released. Sound, too, is part of oceanic structure. Whales and dolphins use echolocation and complex calls to navigate and communicate. Reefs buzz with clicks, snaps, and rumbles. Storms and tectonic events send low-frequency vibrations through the water. From a distance, the sea might appear silent. In reality, it's dense with signals. When you put all of this together, oceans and forests start looking less like passive environments and more like dynamic regulators. They adjust, restore, and maintain conditions within certain ranges. They buffer shocks. They respond to stress. This ability to hold conditions within limits? Homeostasis is one of the hallmarks of living systems. It doesn't prove that forests or oceans are alive in the way a single organism is, but it does suggest that they collectively behave like components of a planet-scale living process. Now, under human pressure, these systems are changing. Vast areas of the Amazon are being cleared or degraded. In some regions, especially where deforestation and warming are intense, the forest has tipped from absorbing carbon to emitting more than it stores. Coral reefs, stressed by warmer and more acidic waters, are bleaching and dying, undercutting the base of marine food webs and weakening the biological pump. Plankton communities are shifting, altering who eats whom and how nutrients move. Ocean circulation patterns show signs of slowing in some areas. Arctic sea ice shrinks, altering how much heat the ocean absorbs. Permafrost thaws, changing hydrology, and releasing more greenhouse gases. These are not isolated problems. They are signs that the systems Earth relies on to self-regulate are being pushed toward new states. Yet even as forests and oceans are disrupted, they don't simply collapse. They reorganize. Species ranges shift, communities reassemble, currents reroute. That reorganization may or may not be friendly to human needs, but it's still the planet's way of seeking a new balance. The key question is speed. In the past, major changes unfolded slowly enough for many systems to adapt. Today, the pace of change is far faster. Feedbacks that once stabilized conditions can flip, accelerating the very disruptions they would previously have moderated. This is the risk we face. Not that Earth will cease to function, but that it will settle into a pattern where the familiar cycles of forests, oceans, and climate look very different from those that nurtured our civilizations. Understanding these organs of the planet gives us leverage. It reveals where our actions disrupt and where they can support. It shows that preserving or restoring forests and marine ecosystems isn't a luxury or a symbolic gesture. It's part of maintaining the planet's capacity to self-adjust. From here, it makes sense to look even closer at the hidden networks beneath our feet systems that resemble, in some ways, the nervous tissue of a planetary body. at the hidden networks beneath our feet systems that resemble, in some ways, the nervous tissue of a planetary body. To explore how a planet might coordinate itself without a brain, we have to go downward into the soil. Not dirt, as in something lifeless and dull, but soil, as it really is. Process, interaction, and an astonishing density of living connections. Most of us treat the ground as a surface we stand on, a resource we farm, a foundation we build over. It seems stable, inert, a place where things grow, rather than a thing that is itself growing and changing. That's largely because our senses are tuned to the wrong scale. At the microscopic level, soil is crowded with structure and activity. One of the most striking discoveries of recent decades is the extent of mycorrhizal networks. Mycorrhiza comes from the Greek for fungus, myx, and root, rhiza. These are mutually beneficial partnerships between plant roots and fungi. Plants feed the fungi sugars from photosynthesis, and in return, fungi extend the plant's reach into the soil, helping them gather water and nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen. But the story doesn't stop with a single plant and its fungal partner. The filaments of mycorrhizal fungi called hyphae connect multiple plants, sometimes entire forests, into shared networks. Through these networks, plants can send and receive not just nutrients, but also chemical signals. Experiments have shown that a tree attacked by insects can pass warning signals through the fungal web, triggering defense responses in neighbors that haven't yet been bitten. Other studies indicate that older, deeper-rooted mother trees often transfer extra carbon and nutrients to younger saplings, especially those struggling in the shade. The direction and amount of flow change with conditions, which suggests something more complex than random diffusion. This raises profound questions. How does the network decide where resources go? What rules are being followed? Is there a kind of memory of stress, of cooperation, of prior exchanges? The fungi themselves have no brains. Trees have no centralized nervous systems. Yet together, the fungus root network behaves in ways reminiscent of a distributed intelligence system. It takes in information, routes, resources, and adapts to changing circumstances. Forest ecologist Suzanne Simmert and her colleagues have been instrumental in mapping these underground connections. Their research portrays forests not as collections of isolated individuals, but as communities linked by a shared infrastructure. Signals move through that infrastructure, responses spread. The parallels to neural networks, while not perfect, are difficult to ignore. Zoom in further and you find that soil teems with microbial life. Bacteria, archaea, microscopic fungi, nematodes, protozoa. A teaspoon of healthy soil can contain billions of organisms representing astonishing genetic and metabolic diversity. These microbes break down organic matter, release nutrients, build and maintain soil structure, influence water retention, and even affect plant health. They communicate chemically, compete, cooperate, and form their own networks of influence. Some can produce compounds that suppress plant diseases. Others enhance plant growth. In that sense, the soil microbiome plays a role similar to the gut microbiome in animals, a hidden community that underpins health, resilience, and response. When we compact soil with heavy machinery, saturate it with synthetic inputs, or strip it of organic matter, we don't just remove nutrients, we disrupt these networks. Complexity falls, redundancy disappears. The soil becomes less responsive and more fragile, and the effects cascade into vegetation, water cycles, and climate. Some researchers are beginning to ask whether soil fungal plant networks exhibit higher level properties like learning or memory. Do they respond differently to repeated stress? Do they remember particular pathogens or droughts? We don't have all the answers, but the patterns are suggestive. When systems can store information about the past and use it to modify future behavior, we're moving into territory we often associate, at least metaphorically, with intelligence. If forests and soils form something like localized neural nets, what happens when we fragment them? Deforestation isn't only the removal of trees, it's the removal of nodes from a network. It severes fungal threads, collapses microbial communities, and disintegrates the structure that supported communication and cooperation. Replanting trees alone doesn't instantly regenerate that complexity. The web itself needs time and conditions to knit back together. Seen this way, Earth doesn't require a nervous system exactly like ours. It may already have a distributed signaling infrastructure made of roots, fungi, microbes, and chemical exchanges. It's slower and more diffuse than a brain, but it's also more pervasive. It stretches beneath grasslands, fields, forests, and wetlands, a planet-wide, low-frequency whisper of information. Above that hidden circuitry, the atmosphere hosts its own vast exchanges of energy and signal, most dramatically expressed in storms. If the soil networks resemble a kind of buried neural mesh, storms are like bursts of dynamic activity in the planet's outer layers. We call them hurricanes, cyclones, thunderstorms, supercells. We typically treat them as events, something that happens, hits, and then moves on. But looked at through the lens of systems, storms are self-organizing structures that form, persist, and dissolve in ways that can seem eerily purposeful. A tropical cyclone begins only when several precise conditions converge: warm ocean water, humid air, low wind shear, and some initial disturbance. When these ingredients align, warm, moist air rises from the ocean, cools, and condenses, releasing heat that fuels further uplift. This sets up a self-reinforcing loop. Heat drives motion, motion pulls in more heat and moisture. The system grows more organized. Spinning with Earth's rotation, the storm wraps itself into a spiral with a calm center and eye, surrounded by a wall of intense winds and rain. The structure constantly adjusts to its environment. Move it over colder water, and it weakens. Increase wind shear, and its core becomes unstable. Cut off its moisture supply by moving it over land, and the engine stalls. It behaves like a heat engine, moving energy from the ocean to the atmosphere, but it also behaves like an emergent entity, maintaining coherence, responding to external variations, sometimes intensifying quickly in ways that challenge our models. Within the storm, the distribution of wind, temperature, and pressure can be astonishingly precise. The same is true in other forms for thunderstorms and supercells. Warm, moist air rises rapidly along fronts or boundaries. Condensation releases energy. Electrical charges separate. Lightning discharges. Downdrafts and updrafts organize themselves into towering cloud structures that can persist for hours. Some storms maintain a delicate balance of inflow and outflow, dynamically stabilizing themselves while traversing hundreds of kilometers. None of this implies that storms want anything, but their behavior formation, maintenance, adaptation, dissolution mirrors patterns we associate with organized, goal-like processes. Scientists sometimes categorize storms and other complex energy-consuming patterns as dissipative structures, systems that maintain order by feeding on gradients, in this case, temperature differences, and exporting entropy. Living organisms are also dissipative structures. They stay organized by taking in energy, doing work, and shedding heat and waste. In this view, the line between life and non-life becomes blurry. What differentiates a storm from a cell or a coral reef? The storm doesn't reproduce in the biological sense, but it does emerge, sustain itself through flows, and then die, all while processing energy and matter. The point here is not to declare storms alive, but to notice how often Earth's systems adopt lifelike modes of organization when they move and regulate energy. The atmosphere, oceans, crust, biosphere, all of them generate structures that look and act like components of a single sprawling metabolism. We can add one more player to this picture: the sky itself. The atmosphere is not simply empty air. It's a layered, chemically active, electrically charged medium that filters solar radiation and mediates energy between space and surface. High in the stratosphere, ozone absorbs much of the sun's harmful ultraviolet light, protecting DNA-based life below. That ozone was only possible because early organisms released oxygen into the air-shifting atmospheric chemistry enough to create a protective filter. Life shaped the shield that now helps sustain life. It's another feedback loop, written in gases and photons rather than nerves. Clouds, aerosols, greenhouse gases, and trace compounds all participate in this ongoing regulation. Volcanic eruptions inject reflective particles and gases into the stratosphere, cooling the surface for years. Human emissions add greenhouse gases and pollution, altering how much heat escapes to space and how clouds form and behave. The atmosphere notices all this, not with eyes, but with temperature, pressure, and circulation patterns. It redistributes heat, transports moisture, and modifies its own composition in response to changes below and above. When large systems like jet streams or monsoons shift, they're not just accidents. They're the atmosphere reconfiguring itself according to new inputs. Taken together, soil networks, forests, oceans, storms, the sky. We begin to see Earth not as a set of separate machines, but as an interconnected, adaptive whole. A web of webs. A system of systems. A body of sorts. The question that lingers is this. At what point does an adaptive, sensing, feedback-rich system cross the threshold into something we might reasonably call conscious, or at least aware? To explore that, we need to look beyond individual storms and forests and try to understand how the entire planetary system integrates information and responds. How the entire planetary system integrates information and responds. We usually reserve the word consciousness for beings like us, creatures with thoughts, language, self-awareness. But in scientific and philosophical discussions, the term can be broader. Sometimes it refers to any system capable of integrating information and responding coherently to changing conditions. Under that wider definition, consciousness doesn't require words or reflection. It requires sensing plus meaningful response. We know other animals meet this bar in many different ways. Elephants recognize themselves in mirrors and appear to mourn their dead. Octopuses manipulate objects, solve puzzles, and seem to have distinct personalities. Certain birds plan for the future, hiding food more cleverly if others are watching. Even insects like bees can learn, remember, and adapt their behavior. Neuroscience hasn't found a single, simple seat of consciousness. Instead, it points to patterns of activity, networks of neurons firing in coordinated ways, linking perception, memory, and action. What matters is not any one cell, but how billions of them interact. Some theories, like integrated information theory, IIT, suggest that consciousness arises from the richness of connections and causal influence within a system. The more a system's parts both affect and depend on each other in complex ways, the higher its degree of consciousness. By that logic, consciousness comes in shades and levels, not as an all-or-nothing property. If we step back and look at Earth as a whole, what do we see? We see a planet where oceans, air, rocks, and life forms are tightly entangled. Changes in one domain ripple quickly or slowly into others. Forest loss modifies rainfall. Ocean warming alters wind patterns. Ice melt changes sea levels and climate. Animal migrations influence vegetation. Vegetation influences atmosphere. Atmosphere influences everything. We also see self-regulation. For long stretches of time, Earth has maintained conditions favorable to liquid water and complex life. It's not perfectly stable, but it tends to resist extremes. When pushed, it often compensates, absorbing extra CO2 in oceans and soils, forming more reflective clouds, redirecting heat with currents and winds. This homeostasis, this tendency toward maintaining viable conditions, is a signature feature of living organisms. Your body is doing it right now, sweating or shivering, balancing blood sugar, adjusting heart rate, fighting off micro-invaders. None of this requires your conscious attention, but it is still, in a broad sense, awareness and response. Does Earth's self-regulation require consciousness? Not necessarily. A thermostat regulates temperature without being conscious, but a thermostat is simple. Earth is not. It's made of innumerable interacting systems and feedbacks, each with its own dynamics. Together they manage heat, water, chemicals, and life in astonishingly intricate ways. This leads to the idea of planetary intelligence or planetary awareness. Not a mind sitting above the planet, not a being with inner monologue, but a distributed capacity to sense, integrate information, and adjust across scales. In that view, no single organism is Earth's brain. Instead, all living and non-living subsystems participate together in something mind-like. Humans, then, are not the mind of Earth so much as one of its latest, most disruptive subsystems. We extend the planet's sensing ability through satellites and instruments, model its behavior with computers, and consciously reflect on the consequences of different choices. We can, in principle, help the planet adjust more skillfully, or push it faster toward instability. Our problem is timescale and perspective. Human consciousness runs on seconds and years. Planetary responses run on decades, centuries, millennia. Even if Earth has a kind of awareness, it would be so slow and diffuse that we likely wouldn't recognize it as such. But we don't need to prove Earth's consciousness to change how we relate to it. It might be enough to recognize that we're part of a massive, interwoven, self-regulating system, and that our actions now are altering its feedbacks in ways that endanger us. From that recognition, another question emerges. If this planet is, in some deep sense, alive, as a complex, adaptive whole, does it have something like a soul? And if so, what would that even mean? The word soul is heavy with religious and cultural meanings, but at its simplest it points to essence. Whatever makes a thing more than just its pieces. For a person, soul is often felt as that inner continuity that persists through change. The layer of experience that hungers for meaning, feels awe, and grieves. If we translate that idea carefully, we might say that Earth's soul is its enduring pattern of relationships. The way stone, water, air, and life interact to produce continuity through time. Mountains record ancient seas in uplifted rock. Ice locks away traces of bygone atmospheres. Rivers carve paths that shape where life can flourish. Forests, reefs, soils, and skies together produce conditions that support ongoing diversity. There is an essence here, a way of being, a persistent style of organization. You can sense it in certain places. A canyon shaped by eons of water. A coastline sculpted by tides. A grove that has outlived empires. Often people describe these places as having presence, spirit, or character. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural to experience that. It arises from the recognition that these landscapes hold long histories, that they've been shaped by countless interactions, and that you are only passing through. Our modern cultures, especially industrial ones, have a habit of reducing these living patterns to background and resource things to extract, develop, or own. In doing so, we act as if Earth has no inner life, no essence worth honoring. We treat forests as timber, rivers as drains, soil as a neutral medium to be engineered rather than a living mesh. But you can't hollow out the networks that maintain a system and expect it to behave the same way. When we strip a forest, we remove not just trees but communication networks, carbon stores, and climate feedbacks. When we drain wetlands, we lose not only habitat but water filtration, flood buffering, and nutrient cycles. When we acidify oceans, we undercut entire food webs and chemical pumps. The result isn't just ecological damage. It's a thinning of the planet's capacity for resilience and renewal, a kind of injury to its essence. Not a wound in flesh, but a wound in relationship. Still, Earth remains remarkably generous. Even in degraded landscapes, life tries to return. Weeds push through concrete, moss grows over ruins, rivers find new routes. The same forces that built rich ecosystems over millennia are still at work, given half a chance. The question isn't whether Earth can survive us. It can. The real question is what role we will choose to play within this living totality. Will we continue as a destabilizing force, overriding feedbacks faster than the system can compensate? Or will we begin to act as a more thoughtful part of the whole, restoring networks, healing soils, regrowing forests, and relearning how to listen? That brings us back to wonder. Wonder is what allows us to see the world as alive in the first place. Not just biologically alive, but alive with pattern, meaning, and connection. It's what blurs the line between scientific understanding and reverence. Almost every thread we've followed, Gaia, feedback loops, soil networks, storms, ice, tectonics, could be approached purely as data. But the people who study these things deeply are often moved by them. They stand in front of retreating glaciers at dawn. They spend nights listening to forests or watching storms. They trace ancient sediments with their fingers. In those moments, what they feel is not only curiosity but also awe and sometimes grief. Wonder doesn't mean ignoring harsh realities. It means caring enough to truly see them. It's what keeps us from reducing Earth to numbers and graphs alone. It reminds us that behind every data point, every ppm of CO2, every lost species, every melted cubic kilometer of ice, there is a living pattern shifting, a world reconfiguring itself. And now, after all the scale shifts and system diagrams, we come back to the most immediate place, where you are, right now. The air in your lungs was shaped by forests and oceans. The calcium in your bones came from ancient seas and rock. The food in your body is sunlight turned into sugar, fueled by soil microbes, pollinators, rain, and time. Your nervous system evolved to navigate landscapes shaped by rivers, hills, storms, and other beings. You are, quite literally, Earth organized into a form that can ask questions about itself. Whether or not we decide to call Earth alive or conscious or soulful, one thing is unavoidable. We belong to it. We are inside its systems, made from its materials, participating in its feedback loops. Our choices are not outside its story. They are part of how that story unfolds. So perhaps the most meaningful shift is this: to stop asking only, is the Earth alive? And instead ask, how do we live as if it matters that we are part of it? Because in the end, the planet will continue adjusting, responding, and becoming. The real unknown is whether we will learn to do the same intentionally, humbly, and in a way that keeps us here as one small, aware expression of a much larger listening world. To understand what it means to live as part of this larger listening world, it helps to look more closely at the kinds of minds we normally ignore, the ones that are nothing like our own, yet still perceive, respond, and shape their surroundings in ways that matter. For a long stretch of our history, humans assumed that true mind, real awareness, belonged only to us. We were the storytellers, the tool makers, the artists. We were the ones who named and measured. Other animals were, at best, clever imitators. But as observation sharpened and experiments multiplied, that hierarchy began to crack. We saw crows solving puzzles that require multi-step reasoning. We saw octopuses unscrewing jars, escaping tanks, and exploring with what looks very much like curiosity. We heard whales speaking in complex patterns, noticed parrots inventing new words, watched dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors. We discovered that ants manage traffic and division of labor with remarkable efficiency. We learned that bees communicate flower locations through precise dances. The idea that only humans have meaningful minds became harder to defend. And that was just the beginning. Beyond animals with obvious eyes and faces, we started finding mind-like qualities in places we'd never thought to look. Plants, for instance, may not have neurons, but they sense an impressive range of signals. They detect light's direction and quality. They feel gravity and orient their roots and stems accordingly. They register touch and vibration, bending, closing, or thickening in response. They respond to temperature shifts and chemical traces. They alter their growth based on crowding, nutrient presence, and even the identity of neighboring plants. They also communicate. When leaves are chewed, many plants release airborne chemicals that signal nearby individuals to bolster their defenses. Some attract the predators of the insects eating them, effectively calling in reinforcements. Underground, roots release compounds that influence nearby plants and the microbes that cluster around them. In some cases, plants adjust their root growth depending on whether they're near kin or unrelated neighbors, suggesting forms of recognition. Is this thinking? Not in the human sense. but it is sensing, integrating, and adjusting hallmarks of what we usually call cognition. Fungi offer another example. Their bodies, made of branching networks of hyphae, spread through soil, wood, and other substrates, exploring and bridging gaps. They follow gradients of nutrients and moisture. They redistribute resources through mycelial networks, sometimes favoring particular sources or sinks. Electrical pulses traveling along hyphae change in pattern when conditions shift, hinting at an internal signaling language we don't yet fully understand. These networks blur the line between individual and community. A single mycelial web can link many plants and patches of soil, moving materials and information across distances. It's less like a single organism and more like a living infrastructure, a routing system for matter and signal. Such examples have led some thinkers to propose that cognition mind, in a broad sense, is not confined to brains. It can emerge wherever there is enough complexity, feedback, and responsiveness. That includes plant fungus microbe collectives, coral reefs, and social insect colonies. It might even include human-made systems like cities and the internet. Philosophies like embodied cognition and extended mind theory suggest that thinking doesn't reside solely inside a skull. It unfolds through bodies, tools, environments, and relationships. When you write notes, use a map, or rely on technology, your cognitive process stretches beyond your neurons. The mind is not just what's inside you, it's also what you're actively coupled to. If that's true for individuals, something similar may be true at larger scales. A forest might not think the way a single human does, but as an interconnected system of plants, fungi, soil microbes, animals, and atmosphere, it may display mind-like properties: memory of disturbance, coordinated responses, pattern recognition, and resilience. The same logic can extend to oceans, climates, and even cities. None of these have a central brain. All of them process information, adapt structures, and shape what can happen next. This challenges our intuitive sense of uniqueness. It also offers a way to think more clearly about Earth as a whole. If mind can emerge from networks at many scales, then it's at least plausible that the planet itself, with its dense web of feedbacks and interactions, has something akin to a distributed awareness. That doesn't mean Earth is a person with opinions. It doesn't mean it has a single point of view. It suggests instead that the planet behaves like a system that continuously registers and responds to its own state. In that light, what we've been calling planetary consciousness could be reinterpreted as planetary cognition, the capacity of Earth systems taken together to process information, maintain structure, and adapt to change. You might still wonder whether this is anything more than metaphor-clever language used to describe complex physics and biology. And it's true that metaphors can mislead if we take them too literally. But the opposite is also true. If we insist that only brains can host mind, we might miss forms of awareness that don't look like our own. Recognizing diverse forms of mind doesn't diminish human experience. If anything, it places us within a larger family of sensing, adjusting systems. It encourages humility and curiosity. It reminds us that we're surrounded by intelligences we didn't create and don't completely understand, and that our survival depends on them. It also reframes the question of what Earth is. Not just a rock with life on top, not just a collection of mechanisms, but a deeply layered, responsive, relational whole. A world that has spent billions of years learning, through trial and feedback, how to keep water flowing, temperatures in range, and complexity growing. If there is anything like a soul in this context, it may be found in that long, ongoing experiment Earth, continuously transforming and being transformed by what it holds. And now, after all these scales and systems, we're brought back to ourselves, not as rulers of this experiment, but as one of its latest expressions. One of the ways the Earth has begun to ask, in words and models and choices, what kind of world it wants to become. To ask what kind of world Earth wants to become is really to ask what kind of role we are willing to play inside it. Because unlike microbes or forests or storms, We can imagine futures we haven't yet lived. We can model outcomes before they happen. We can choose to alter our behavior based on what we learn. But that ability comes with a problem. We are not built, emotionally or cognitively, for planetary scales. Our nervous systems evolved for village life and local landscapes, not for interpreting satellite data or thinking in centuries. That mismatch is a big part of why it feels so hard to respond appropriately to what Earth is telling us. Our attention is tuned to immediacy. We notice what is near, loud, personal, and fast. A threat in the room grips us more tightly than a slow shift in rainfall patterns halfway across the world. Yet, through technology and global systems, we now influence precisely those slow, distant, abstract patterns more than ever before. We feel small, but act large. Earth's signals melting ice, retreating glaciers, changing storm tracks, altered migration patterns, unfold over years and decades. They accumulate quietly until a threshold is crossed and a crisis appears. By the time the crisis is obvious, the underlying processes have often been in motion for a long time. This delay between cause and effect makes it easy to shrug or postpone. We tell ourselves it's not urgent yet, or that someone else will act, or that the system is too big for individual choices to matter. We fall back into the comfortable fiction that we are separate from Earth, rather than expressions of it. But if we are, as we've been exploring, part of Earth's extended mind, one of the ways the planet senses and responds to itself, then our inaction is not neutral. It's a kind of internal confusion, like a part of a body ignoring pain signals from another part. What would it look like to respond instead as if we truly believed we were cells in a larger organism? It might not mean grand, heroic gestures. Systems as large as Earth don't turn on dime decisions. They shift through accumulated patterns. That means everyday behavior is not trivial. It's structural. How we eat, move, build, make energy, tell stories, and organize our economies, all of that becomes part of the planet's feedback loops. Acting as if Earth is alive, or at least deeply responsive, might mean paying more attention to place, learning the rhythms of local weather, water, and soil, understanding which species live near us, what they need, and how our routines affect them. Remembering that every region is a unique expression of the larger system, with its own vulnerabilities and gifts, aligning with cycles rather than fighting them. Designing agriculture that respects soil regeneration instead of exhausting it. Using energy in ways that follow sun and wind patterns instead of forcing fossilized sunlight from the deep past into the present at reckless speed. Treating water as a flowing, shared presence rather than a commodity. Restoring networks, not just objects. Planting trees, yes, but also protecting mycorrhizal webs, wetlands, coral reefs, and migratory corridors. Recognizing that resilience comes from connectivity and diversity, not just abundance of any one thing. Listening to feedback early. Treating small local signs of stress-declining insect populations, unusual algae blooms, strange weather clusters, not as isolated curiosities, but as parts of a global conversation. Acting before thresholds are crossed, rather than after. Reimagining success. Measuring progress not only by extraction and output, but by health of ecosystems, stability of climates, and capacity for regeneration. Asking whether our activities add to the planet's long-term coherence or erode it. On a personal level, none of this requires perfect purity or constant guilt. We are embedded in systems we didn't choose, relying on infrastructures we didn't design. But we are not helpless within them. We can push for better energy sources, support regenerative farming, back policies that protect ecosystems, and shift cultural narratives away from domination and toward participation. We can also cultivate habits of attention, small daily practices of noticing the world around us, watching how light moves through the day, learning the names of local plants and birds, tracking the first frost, the earliest blossoms, the arrival and departure of migratory species. These acts might seem modest, but they keep our senses connected to the systems we depend on. They reinforce the truth that we are in relationship, not in control. Earth will keep changing. That's what it does. The question is whether we change with it in ways that preserve the conditions we and countless other beings require. If the planet is, in some sense, alive or aware, then our current moment could be seen as a stress test, a period when one of its subsystems, human civilization, is generating signals that strain the larger network. The outcome is not predetermined. Feedback is still flowing. Choices still cascade. We may never know for sure whether Earth thinks or feels, but we can know with rising clarity that it responds, and that our responses in turn matter. In that thick web of action and reaction, of sensing and adjusting, of memory and renewal, there is something that looks very much like conversation. The planet speaks in climate, in currents, in species, in cycles. We answer in emissions, in restoration, in consumption, in care. The task ahead is not to prove the Earth is alive, but to behave as if its aliveness, however we define it, is worth honoring. To recognize that we are part of a mind and a body larger than our own, and to live in a way that helps rather than harms its ability to go on becoming. Because whether we picture Earth as a vast organism, a self-regulating system, or a complex set of intertwined cycles, one fact remains: we are inseparable from it. Our fate and its ongoing story are already one. If we accept that our fate and the planet's story are already entwined, then the question shifts yet again. It's no longer just, is Earth alive or is Earth conscious? But how do we practice being part of this vast responsive system in a way that feels honest, grounded, and sustainable for us as people? Because it's not only the planet that struggles with balance, we do too. We live at the intersection of overwhelming knowledge and limited emotional bandwidth. We can read about glaciers collapsing, coral reefs bleaching, forests burning, and still have to get up the next morning, go to work, pay bills, care for families, do laundry. We carry planetary scale grief in bodies that evolved to handle village-level problems. This tension is one of the hardest parts of being human now. On the one hand, we see more than any generation before us: satellite images, global data sets, live feeds from fires and floods. On the other hand, our capacity to act directly on what we see is limited by distance, infrastructure, and time. It's easy in that gap to slip into paralysis or denial. We tell ourselves it's too late, or too complicated, or someone else's responsibility. We compartmentalize, cycling between bursts of concern and long stretches of distraction. Yet if we are truly an expression of Earth's own capacity to notice and respond, then giving up on response is a kind of self-betrayal. It's a refusal to use the specific form of awareness we've been given. So how do we carry awareness without being crushed by it? One answer is scale. We can't hold the whole planet in our minds at once, but we can hold a place. A river, a city, a coastline, a forest edge. We can learn its patterns, its stresses, its needs. We can act there, with others, in ways that are concrete and trackable. And through those actions, we become part of the larger feedback systems we've been talking about. Another answer is community. No one person can solve planetary problems, but groups of people, families, neighborhoods, movements, professions can shift behaviors and norms. We can design buildings differently, manage land differently, vote differently, teach differently, invest differently. Each small pattern, multiplied, becomes a global signal. A third answer is imagination. The future is not yet fixed. We don't have to accept only the extremes of collapse or denial. There are many possible worlds between business as usual and total breakdown. Some of those worlds involve deep transformation, new forms of economy, energy, agriculture, and culture. None of them will be perfect. All will involve trade-offs. But imagination allows us to see beyond the narrow set of futures currently marketed to us. Imagination, in this context, is not escape. It's a tool for sensing paths that align human activity more closely with Earth's rhythms. It lets us ask, what would a city look like if it acted more like a forest capturing water, generating energy, cycling nutrients, supporting diverse life? What would a farm look like if it followed the logic of a prairie or wetland rather than an assembly line? What would an economy look like if it measured success by health and regeneration instead of only by growth? We don't have final answers for any of these questions. But we don't need final answers to start experimenting. Earth itself is an ongoing experiment in complexity, testing what works over time. We can align with that experiment by trying many localized solutions, sharing what works, discarding what doesn't, and staying alert to feedback. We can also reclaim a more intimate sense of relationship with the world around us. That doesn't mean abandoning science. It means layering science with story, attention, and care. It's okay to feel that a river has character, that a mountain has presence, that a forest has a kind of voice. Those intuitions, handled with humility, can coexist with measurements and data. They can even motivate them. In many indigenous traditions, such layered relationships are normal. Land is not just scenery, it is ancestor, teacher, relative. Responsibilities flow from that understanding. When you are in kinship with a place, you don't casually harm it. You seek reciprocity, not domination. Modern science, for all its analytical power, often lacks this relational dimension, but it doesn't oppose it. In fact, the closer science looks, the more it reveals patterns of interdependence and subtlety that older traditions recognized in different language. A mycelial network under a forest floor may not be called a spirit, but it behaves in ways that justify reverence. A river's seasonal rise and fall may not be seen as a deity's mood, yet it still demands respect and restraint. A coral reef's intricate architecture might be described in chemical and genetic terms instead of mythic ones, but its vulnerability and beauty still call something deep in us to attention. Wonder then becomes not just a feeling but a discipline. A way of refusing to flatten the world into mere resource or backdrop. A way of continually remembering that the systems we measure are also the systems we belong to. From here, there's one last move to make. To recognize that the line we draw between Earth and us is in many ways a convenient fiction. Our bodies are made of the same elements and obey the same laws. Our minds are shaped by the same evolutionary pressures. Our cultures rise and fall within the same climatic envelope. We are not standing on the outside, looking at a living planet. We are the inside of a living planet, briefly realizing that this is what we are. And that realization, if we let it in, can change how we move through the world, not in grand cinematic ways, but in steady, everyday choices that, over time, become part of Earth's own attempt to keep becoming what it can be. To say we are the inside of a living planet, briefly realizing itself, is not just a poetic flourish. It has practical consequences. It suggests that our thoughts, feelings, technologies, and cultures are not separate from Earth's processes, but extensions of them, new branches on a very old tree. Think about what that implies for responsibility. When a part of a body harms another part, the body doesn't declare that part an enemy. It tries to heal, to integrate, to restore function. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it doesn't. When a part becomes too destructive and can't be brought back into balance, the whole organism may be threatened. Right now, human activity is that troubling part. We've become exceptionally good at reshaping environments, burning stored carbon, redirecting water, and rearranging matter. We've done this so effectively that we've pushed Earth's regulating systems toward new states. Yet we're also the part of the planet that can recognize this, speak about it, and intentionally change course. That tension between our capacity to destabilize and our capacity to understand is the defining feature of our moment. If we truly are an aspect of Earth's extended cognition, then listening to planetary feedback isn't optional. It's what a healthy mind does when it notices pain, imbalance, or strain. The planet is signaling in all the ways we've explored, through climate shifts, ecosystem breakdowns, species declines, and changing rhythms of ice, water, and air. The question is not whether Earth is sending messages in a human sense, but whether we are willing to interpret its responses as information that should shape our behavior. To do that, we need more than data. We need a felt sense that what happens to forests, oceans, soils, and skies happens in some way to us, not as an abstract statement, but as something that reaches into daily life. This doesn't mean carrying constant despair. In fact, despair can be another form of disconnection, the belief that we are mere spectators to an inevitable collapse. But we are not spectators. We are participants, and participation always contains some degree of agency, however constrained. We can't rewind the clock. We can't undo all damage. But we can choose between futures that are more or less harmful, more or less aligned with the living systems that support us. That means acting at multiple scales at once, individually, by learning, reducing harm where we can, cultivating attention to place, and supporting life-affirming practices in our own routines. Socially, by organizing, voting, creating, teaching, and building cultures that normalize care for land, water, and other beings. Structurally, by transforming energy systems, infrastructure, agriculture, and economies so that they operate within planetary boundaries instead of pretending those boundaries don't exist. All of this is difficult. It will involve conflict, experimentation, and uncertainty. But from the perspective we've been developing, it's also something more profound. It is Earth, through us, attempting to rebalance itself consciously for the first time. For billions of years, the planet's self-regulation has been implicit, emergent, unconscious. Feedback loops corrected imbalances without needing awareness in the human sense. Now, a species has arisen that can see these loops, name them, and intentionally choose how to interact with them. We are that species. This is the moment we find ourselves in. Whether we think of Earth as alive, as conscious, or simply as a complex, responsive system, the invitation is the same: to live as if our actions matter in the long story of this world, to recognize that every choice is a small vote for the kind of feedbacks we want to reinforce, those that support resilience and renewal, or those that accelerate breakdown. In the end, perhaps we don't need to settle the metaphysical question of Earth's inner life. It may remain an open mystery, as distant from our full understanding as our own deepest consciousness is from the neurons that generate it. What we can know is this: we breathe because this planet has made breath possible. We think because this planet has evolved creatures who can think. We care because this planet has, through countless experiments in life and relationship, given rise to beings capable of care. That is enough to act on. So we return to where we began. You, sitting or standing somewhere on or near the skin of this world. The air around you is part of its circulation. The ground beneath you is part of its memory. The life within you is part of its ongoing attempt to become more than rock and water alone. Maybe Earth is alive. Maybe it is conscious in some slow, distributed way. Maybe it has something like a soul, woven from stone and ocean and time. Or maybe it is none of these, and still more wondrous than our words can hold. Either way, you are not outside it. You are an instance of it, a temporary thinking, feeling expression of a planet that has learned again and again how to respond to change. What you do with that realization is, in the smallest and largest sense, part of how Earth decides what to become next. If we follow this thought all the way to its edge, we arrive at a strangely intimate conclusion. Every decision you make, no matter how small it feels, is in some way an Earth decision. Not because you carry the planet on your shoulders, but because you are a tiny extension of its capacity to choose. When you pause before buying something and ask where it came from, what it's made of, and where it will go when you're finished, that is Earth. Through you, questioning the flow of its own materials. When you choose to support food grown in ways that regenerate soil instead of depleting it, that is Earth. Through you, shifting how it feeds itself. When you stand up for a river, a forest, a community on the front lines of climate change, that is Earth. Through you. protecting parts of its own body. None of these acts are total solutions. None of them single-handedly save anything. But together, multiplied across millions of lives, they can alter the direction of feedback loops. They can slow some harmful processes, accelerate healing ones, and open space for new possibilities to emerge. The same is true of how you cultivate your inner life. When you allow yourself to feel wonder at a night sky, gratitude for a drink of clean water, or grief at the loss of a species, that emotional honesty helps counter one of the most dangerous illusions of our time. The idea that we are separate, superior, or exempt. It's possible to be overwhelmed by the scale of the planetary moment and still be deeply alive to it. To carry both sorrow and awe. To recognize damage and still choose to participate in repair. That balance between knowing the truth and refusing to surrender to numbness is its own kind of homeostasis, enacted at the scale of a single human psyche. From the planet's perspective, if we can imagine such a thing, this might be one of the most important regulatory responses available right now. Billions of small conscious adjustments in how we live, driven not only by fear of loss but by love of what remains and curiosity about what could still grow. Love in this sense is not sentimental. It is a form of alignment. To love a place is to want it to continue becoming itself. To love a species is to care whether it survives. To love a river is to keep it moving, clean and free. Love is the felt recognition that another part of Earth's pattern matters, even when there is no direct payoff for us. Curiosity, likewise, keeps us looking for better ways to live here. It asks, how can cities function more like ecosystems? How can economies circulate value instead of extracting it until there is none left? How can cultures honor limits and interdependence without losing creativity and joy? Earth has been experimenting with forms of life for billions of years. We are one of those experiments. Our technologies, societies, and stories are tools in that experiment. The fact that we can ask how to use them more wisely is already a sign that something inside the planetary system is trying to self-correct at a new level. There is no guarantee we will succeed. Many past experiments on Earth have ended in extinction. But there is also no guarantee we will fail. The future is a field of branching paths, not a single pre-written script. So perhaps the most honest way to end is not with certainty, but with an invitation to notice more, to listen more carefully to the places you inhabit, to learn the rhythms of your own body as part of larger cycles, to treat your life not as an isolated project, but as one small collaboration with a much older, wider intelligence. You don't have to name that intelligence. You don't have to agree on whether Earth is alive or conscious or sacred. You only have to recognize that it is responsive, that what we do echoes through its systems, and that what it does reverberates through us. Standing in that recognition, you might feel, even for a moment, that the ground beneath you is not just something you stand on. It is something you stand within. It holds you, shapes you, and listens through you. And as you breathe in, out, you participate in the oldest conversation this planet has ever had. The exchange of air, energy, and awareness between a world and the beings it has brought forth to know it. What you offer back through your attention, your choices, your care is up to you. Is up